Okay, welcome everybody.
Welcome.
Sandra, I invite you when you get a chance to go to our first review slide today for how to pray as a Jew, how and why. Superb. Can everybody see that slide?
A little on the small, there it's better.
There you go.
Yeah,
There we
perfect.
go.
All right, outstanding. I feel that way too, a little on the small side. So we talked a little bit last week about how the rubrics of the service works, namely that it is all sort of a stepping up to Torah, right? And the, I'm sorry, Ruben?
Sorry.
So anyway, the first two pieces on this particular slide, and this is looking at a Saturday morning service, the Birkot HaShachar, the Besukei de Zimra, this is our warm-up. If we were thinking about this like, a team sport, this is how we would get our heart rate warm. We get ourselves warm. The Shema and its blessings begin our formal worship. So until you hear that Baruch Hu, you're really doing your warm-up activity. Once we start with the Baruch Hu, which is the first of the Shema and its blessings, and we're going to get more, we'll do a deeper dive in that piece of the service today. We go to the Amidah. Sandra, would you mute everybody just for right now, only because I'm hearing a lot of sounds from, I think, eating.
Dogs.
I
Dogs.
can't that unless you make me the co-host.
Okay, so let me do that now. Sorry about that, guys. So the Amidah, which is quite an interesting piece that we're going to talk probably more about next week. To a silent prayer, really our words to God, culminating in the pinnacle, God's words to us, the Torah. And when I talk Torah here, I'm talking in a much more broad context, remembering that that includes on a Shabbat morning, Haftarah, and go back, sorry, Cassandra, go back, please, thank you. Haftarah, and may include something from the Ketuvim. One of the things that we're going to do when we get to this Torah slide is talk about the Hebrew Bible, what it entails, and what the meaning of our oral traditions are, our written traditions, and look more at scripture on a whole. And then we begin our warm down, right? The Aleinu, Kaddish, closing song really is where we sort of warm down completely. So that gives you all of an overview. Any questions about that? I am going to make Cassandra my co-host. And there we go. Next slide, please. So here we left off last week. I'm just going to move this over. Ooh, maybe I can't. Right in the middle of the slides is this. Let's move you. Okay. So we talked very briefly last week about petitionary prayers in the Amidah. That when we get to Shabbat, those prayers that we do called the Shmona Esrei, which means 18. But if we're going to be honest, guys, there's 19 of them. Changes a little bit. So Shabbat, you're used to those first three blessings of the Amidah. Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagi tehilatecha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu. Our calling card to God, telling God who we are. And Atah Gibor Leolam Adonai, which talks about God's strength. Okay? We go through our Amidah, but we, on Shabbat, are not doing the normative petitionary prayer. And what takes the place of it is this Kiddushat Hayom, holiness of the day. It is probably best known to you, one of them is best known to you actually, is Yismechu. Yismechu Malachutecha Shomrei Shomrei, which is really just about the joy of the day, the holiness of the day. What makes today so special and meaningful? Moving on, please, and we'll talk more about that a little bit as we explore. Okay, now we're going into sort of our thanks prayers. The Ritzeh, the Moedim, we have been in the habit of doing them quite privately, right? Part of a silent Amida, it means that these are not done aloud, but instead are a more internal inventory, a way of saying thank you. And then we come together for the peace prayer. The peace prayer, whether it be Shalom Rav or Oseh Shalom or Sim Shalom, is the ending of the Amidah section. It closes it out, okay? So that we can begin our next section. And Cassandra, I'll invite you to go there now. All right, Misha Berach, right? Now this, when we first instituted it, there was a lot of pushback. Can anyone think why there might have been some pushback about instituting a Misha Berach? And don't forget to unmute yourself. No ideas?
Because people were afraid of what it might say and what it was going to do or not do.
What do you mean, Rube?
Because would it really heal? I'm guessing afraid of change and what I'm not sure how to put it, but just afraid of what did it mean and what was it going to do for us?
Okay, Bindi?
Would it have anything to do with the same way we wouldn't talk about cancer out loud? We would, that kind of, I'm not sure if that's what Ruben's talking about, but just mentioning it, would people be superstitious about that?
Well, it's interesting because I don't know how many of you grew up with that, but I certainly did grow up with the fact that cancer got whispered.
Sure.
That was the one word where suddenly, it was a very strange phenomenon. It's a very strange phenomenon. But, I think there's a couple things. I hope that, let me illustrate how Herman Schallman felt about it. He was one of those who said, what are we doing here? This is truthfully something that seemed Christian to him. It seemed Christian to him.
Who are you talking about?
I'm talking about Rabbi Schallman.
Oh.
I don't know if you noticed, but a lot of our words when we pray during Shabbat have a suffix on them, nu, anachnu, right? Avinu, malkenu. Does anyone know what nu means at the end of a Hebrew word? Unmute yourself, Benz.
Isn't that us?
Yeah, it's us. And if you, so our prayers on Shabbat are collective, aren't they? They're very collective. And yet one of the things we do during the Misha Berach is we ask for names. So so let me explain something first. Misha Berach is not simply a prayer for healing. It's actually a formula for prayer. We use Misha Berachs all the time. We use a Misha Berach, for example, when one is getting ready to go to Israel. Just like Baruch Atah Adonai is a formulaic, Misha Berach Avotenu V'Imotenu is also a formulaic. So that's not the issue. The issue is not that we're saying a prayer collectively for healing, but the calling out of a name, going around the room for names for specific people might be what some feel is not very Shabbos-y. Now, it's not that we don't do this in other places in our Jewish worship, okay? But, or we don't list names other places. We do. When we call people to the Torah, we call their name. It's not a collective, right? But this is felt strange to some because of that understanding. Clear as mud?
I was going to say, couldn't the problem with the names also be going back to what Bindi said, the fact that you're afraid of naming someone who is sick in the first place, because of, whether it's cancer or anything else?
So that you would feel superstitious by naming them?
Yes.
Everybody has their own personal mishigas, right? And it's funny because we are incredibly superstitious as a people, and yet the rabbis really railed against it, didn't want us to be superstitious. And yet they were superstitious too, so it's very funny, right? Anyway, it's just an interesting thing to take note of. Let's move to our next slide. Okay, these are our concluding prayers. The Aleinu, right, talks about what's incumbent upon us. That we are indeed God's partners. And it really harkens to the world as it should be, a future world, right? We get uncomfortable in Reform Judaism discussing Mashiach, don't we? It's not a concept we are comfortable with. And yet, there is inherent in our Jewish prayers a piece of this world to come. Bayom ha'hu, right? In that day that Lord will be the King of all, right? That this is a coming, we're not here yet. And then the Kaddish prayer, which is exquisite in its construction, but it is a formula that's done before too. A Chatzi Kaddish, that's which we talked about earlier, which divides our service, which is like putting a binder page between sections in a book, uses these words, not all of them, but is a Chatzi, a half Kaddish. The Kaddish we're talking about here is a Kaddish Yatom, a mourner's Kaddish. Never, ever saying anything about death. Merely, it is a group of synonyms in Aramaic that talk about God's sovereignty. And, he's exalted, he's just about his strength. It's a bunch of synonyms sort of put together of all God's fabulousness, sort of, and isn't in Hebrew. So it causes some real trickiness, doesn't it, for some, because the words are hard. Okay, any questions with what I've just shared with you so far? Roz, do you have a question?
No, thank you though.
All right, so next slide.
I don't know if it's you, Shelly, or someone, but sometimes I hear you twice.
Yeah, that happens when it's somebody else's system and it's just doing sort of a feedback loop. So I just muted everybody. So, hopefully that will help. Bindala.
Is the Hatzi Kaddish half the Kaddish?
It's a little bit more than half, but yes, that's what it means. Chatzi or chetzi means half.
Thank you.
So let's talk about themes, because there's overwhelming themes. And there's three main ones that I want you to look out for as we do a deeper dig. creation, revelation, redemption. All right, let's unpack this. Why creation? Why is creation so important to us to sort of reflect back on?
We wouldn't be here without creation.
That's true. That's true. Why else? I gave you a clue on your page. On the seventh day, God finished the work of creation, which God was doing. And what do we do on that seventh day?
We rest. And without
Right.
creation, what would there be to rest from?
Well, we are modeling God,
hmm
right? On the seventh day, God rests. Oh, okay. Well, we get it, right? This is one of Judaism's gifts to the world, is a day of no work. And we talked a little bit about work, what I mean by work. We're talking about malacha. Remember we talked about, I was kidding you about the dyeing, the sewing, the seed, and the work of the tabernacle is what we're talking about when we're looking at malacha, building. You know, anything that had to do with that work of the tabernacle is verboten. Avodah, which also means work in Hebrew, is the work of prayer, right? This is a heavy lift too, but it's different. It's different. It's sacred work in this particular case. So let's move on a little bit. Okay. So Jewish liturgy can be divided into three. Oh, I didn't go back to the slide. I forgot to do the two others. Oh my goodness gracious. All right, revelation. Why? Why is that important for us to be digging in here too? Why would we need to be talking about a revelation? First of all, what does revelation mean to you?
It means revealing something.
Okay, what got revealed?
Well, he revealed the Torah.
Right, God certainly did. And what's in that revelation, Linda? What's in that Torah? I think you got muted, sweetie pie.
Yeah, I just unmuted.
What's in that Torah?
How we're supposed to live.
So that would be pretty important, wouldn't you think, to make part of our Shabbat practice?
Right.
But more than that, in that revelation is a relationship, isn't it? Because if you look at God revealing God's self in the burning bush, or you look at God's revealing God's self at Torah, it's clear that we have a covenant together, that God has shown up for us. Now, God's showing up is not the same, right? But we hearken back to those moments of revelation to remind us, and maybe even to remind God, of that covenantal partnership we have, right? And lastly, redemption. How are we redeemed? Feel free to unmute yourself. How are we redeemed? Anybody?
I was gonna say many times. First, there was the Exodus from Egypt,
Yeah.
and then more modernly, those who were liberated during the Shoah.
Well, you know, the show gets into some difficult theology, doesn't it? But let's go back to your first point, because you're right on target here. The redemption of us from slavery to freedom creates a responsibility. Namely, if Revelation says, you know what? We have a covenant. Redemption is bringing God then into the world, right?
Mhm.
So Revelation is, we have this relationship. Redemption means we are free to share what the relationship means, and puts this enormous amount of responsibility on us, right? So I want you, as we look at these prayers, to sort of think to yourself, where do these prayers fall? What are we noticing about the Shabbat theme, and how do they resonate? How does it resonate? Okay, now the next slide.
Well, one of the things that just occurred to me as we were talking this is that it's like each part of these, it's like we're reliving like we do with Pesach.
Yes,
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. The importance of remembrance is so inherent in the fabric of our Jewish worship. It must be, right? Because really within it is the entirety of our history. So, to turn a blind eye to any of those components doesn't explain who we are in the world. So we keep the part of the Vehafta we're going to look at today, V'dibarta ba'am, to teach them to one's children, right? The idea that this is Lador of Ador, that the memory is told from generation to generation, it's intrinsic to who we are as Jews, both one to another and who we are to God and who God is to us. So Jewish liturgy can be divided up into these three main categories. Obviously, the prayer piece. I want to tell you about prayer a little bit. I want to tell you about two different words, keva and kavanah. Have any of you heard these words, keva and kavanah? So keva is the structure, is the formula, is the order. In a Passover Seder, keva this is the list of things we do. Kavanah is the intention, right? Our intentionality, where our minds are at in terms of focus, where our heart is at in terms of connection, right? So the kavanah is where it is our peace, our ability to be intentional and to be connected. Blessings are recited obviously on certain occasions, right? Eating something, performing a commandment. It is said that we're supposed to be doing 100 of these blessings every day. That the rabbis, there's so many blessings around us that we shouldn't be able to go but a few feet before another one comes to us and we recite a blessing. Now, imagine if we lived our lives like that, right? Where we actually got up in the morning and said, thanks, God, and recited a blessing, or on seeing a rainbow, or seeing the rain, or making note of our breath, our heartbeat, right? These are, we would change the world if everybody took the miracles that surround us and made note of them. And then last, ritual, right? Passover Seder, redeeming the firstborn. Those are just two of many sets of rituals. Those who go to mikvah, right? Those are the ritual components. Any questions about these three categories?
Well, actually not a question, but I was going to say, although it wasn't the full service, when you're a camper at Azrui, you do say there is a morning service, and actually as of now, a friend of mine put me on to a rabbi from Georgia, and at least once or twice a week, I've been praying Shachrit with her.
I think that's wonderful,
Mhm.
right? Just because we don't have a minyan at Emmanuel, weekday services, morning services, evening services, this is part of our prayer life. Reform Judaism just doesn't have, that's not where our congregation's at. But certainly
Mhm.
more traditional settings, right? This is,
Mhm.
you don't just come to shul on Shabbat. All right, thank you, Ruben. We're going to move
You're
on.
welcome.
Okay, so what I decided to do is to walk away from the first two sections. Let me explain why. The warm-ups. It's not that they're not important. It's that I wanted to be sure that we were able to cover meat and potatoes here, okay? And when you're talking about either morning blessings that get you warmed up or the evening counterparts, right? They had a tradition about happening first and foremost at home. So, on Friday nights in Emmanuel, we light the candles and we do kiddush. But these normatively are what happens at one's home, not at the synagogue. So, what would happen in a more traditional setting is a short Kabbalat Shabbat service would happen, and then one would go home to a dinner in which one would use their table as the Shabbat altar, and lighting of the candles would happen there, the kiddush, blessing one's children, the ritual of washing one's hands with the appropriate bracha, and then the blessing over the challah. Remember, Shabbat is a meat meal, traditionally. And so that harkens back to the sacrifice. So because we're unpacking Friday night here, I didn't want to include that part. Now we've gone to a model of Kabbalat Shabbat, and we're still deciding whether this experiment is working for us or not. The idea would be that one could go home and light the Shabbat candles and make kiddush and on and on and on. So I started here with the Shema and its blessings. Any questions about that? You all good? All right, let's unpack the Shabbat and its blessings. So Cassandra, if you wouldn't mind, next slide, please. Okay. First up in the greatest hits of the Shema and its blessings is the Baruch Hu, the call to worship. This is a super fascinating idea. When we talk about the call to worship, this really is an alarm clock going off. The way it traditionally happens is that the Shliach Tzibur, the emissary, that's usually the Cantor or the Chazan, calls out to the congregation, "Blessed is God who's blessed, and you return to me that you are ready. Blessed is God who is blessed now and forever." We're going to look at that more in depth. So this is one of those prayers that has to be done in a minyan. If one is praying at home, you would never do a Baruch Hu, right? And it's typically done facing Jerusalem. Most synagogues are actually oriented that the ark is facing east, in our case, towards Jerusalem. Obviously, if you're the other side, you're going to be facing west. It is the invitation to begin prayer. And you responding to me tells me you are ready for that pursuit. Okay? Let's move on to our next slide and unpack it. Okay. So what I did here is I put the Hebrew, I put the transliteration, and I put the translation. So would someone like to read this for me? Just the first part. the Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamavorach.
Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamavarach.
Okay.
Barring et Baruch Hu and straightening et Adonai. Blessed Adonai who is blessed.
And let me go one step farther, because there is real choreography right here, isn't this? And you've
Mhm.
seen me do it. So a berach in Hebrew is a knee. Baruch, berach. Can you hear how they sound?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? Okay. So one bends at the knee. Baruch, Baruch Hu, et, and they come up at Adonai because they stand straight. God is yashar. God is straight up, right? They bend. They stand for Adonai. Now, at Emmanuel, we tend to sing this all together, but I'd love for us to institute a different plan. I would really like to bring this back to call and worship, because this is an important part of information, that you are indeed ready to join with me. And if you were to not answer me, I would not be able to go on. So the congregation responds, and traditionally I would repeat this. I don't in a manual. And what would be the next thing that's said? Someone read the Hebrew.
Baruch Adonai Hamvrach Ve'olam Va'ed.
Good. A lot to unpack here, guys.
Mhm.
First of all, I want you to notice something. Blessed are you, God, who is blessed. Does that seem chutzpahdik to anyone but me? And why might I think this is chutzpahdik? Chutzpahdik, if anyone doesn't know, means, I don't want to use this word, but it's,
Gutsy.
gutsy. Thank you. I was thinking of another word that I didn't want to use. So gutsy, right? Blessed is God who is blessed. Why is this gutsy, you guys? Ladies and gentlemen, who are we to bless God? Who are we? The heck is that all about? Blessed. Hey, you know what, God? You're okay with us. The heck? I thought God did the blessing. No, not from a Jewish standpoint. We can bless God. And what I love most about this is that when you turn 13, you get to shout that out from the rooftop. So here's this little 13-year-old person. Blessed are you, who's blessed, God. Good for you, right? It's fabulous. It's fabulous. And your response to me, blessed is God who's blessed now and forever, maybe gives us a hint at something. Namely, what do you all think about? Well, first of all, does anyone know what Leolam Vaed, it says on the slide, doesn't it? Did I put on the slide what Leolam Vaed? Yeah. Leolam Vaed means forever and ever. What does that mean to you? It means that after we're gone, right?
Eternally.
Forever and ever means eternally. It also might share a bias we have that we don't much talk about as Reformed Jews. And it's going to show up another place. I don't want to give it away. But the idea of, hey, Rabbi, good to see you. The idea of life after death, the idea of eternal life is one that shows up. We don't usually, as Reformed Jews, give it much credence because we're uncomfortable with it, but it's there. It's there. And I'm going to point it out to you in another place as well. Any questions about this particular blessing? Yes, Bindala.
To me, it doesn't necessarily say who I will see forever and ever. It just means that God is blessing that person forever and ever.
God's not blessing, we're blessing. We're blessing.
We can bless. How can we bless?
That's the beauty of it.
We,
Wherein lies the beauty. We got the chutzpah, baby. Blessed are you, God, who's blessed, right?
but by us or by God?
I think you need to make that determination. I think it's clear we bless God by our actions, right? And even this avodah, this sacred work, is part of the way that we bless God. Look at this is about Thanksgiving, Bindi, right? We're blessed all the time. We talked earlier about if we were to just open our eyes to those blessings and give the 100 blessings as we notice all that surrounds us, we are continuously being blessed. We're inundated with it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Here is our response to it. We are about to bless you, God, by our actions, by the pursuit of mitzvot, right? By this sacred worship. And that we have the power to be that kind of, as the rabbi loves to say, force for good is extraordinary. It's a gift. Any other comments about that? Rabbi, feel free to chime in anytime you want. You don't have to mute yourself. You're always welcome. Let's move on to our next slide. All right, let's talk about minyan. So I just told you the Baruch Hu has to be done if there's a minyan. What's with the arbitrary 10? What do you know about 10?
10 is in the 10 Commandments.
Okay, what else?
I remember having a portion that I read where it said,
Read it. Yes.
I think it started at 50 and it went down to 10 people. And that's where that
Interesting.
part stopped.
Interesting. Yes, you did. So you read Abraham, who was bargaining with God to find 10 righteous people so that he didn't destroy the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah.
Well, there was another part in Deuteronomy that I read.
The part I'm thinking about is Numbers.
Oh, maybe it is now. But it's he's saying, I need help. I can't do it alone. We'll have 50 of these. And it went down to like 10 people.
So God was looking for some God actually says, let's delegate. You're right, you can't do it alone. But and you're right about that, but there's another piece of sacred text that gives us these 10. And I want you to think of not a bright spot in our history. How many of you know the story of the spies? Bum, bum, bum. So let me give you a quick recap.
8 of them didn't want to go into Israel and convince the people.
Didn't want to go into Israel. There are 12 spies. Joshua and Caleb are part of that group.
Oh.
Joshua and Caleb. So let me give everyone a recap because it's good stuff, you guys. So God says to Moses, listen, I don't know, maybe you won't like, perhaps the land. Why don't you check out what I've given your forefathers with my full heart? And if Moses was really thinking through the nature of a Jewish parent, Moses might have said to God, hey, no. I'm sure it's beautiful, Dad. I'm gonna love it. But Moses goes, okay, you know what? You're right. We should check that out. Shmendrik. So he sends 12 spies out to spy out the land that's been promised to our ancestors. And the Shmendriks come back and say, you know what? This is a horrible idea. There are giants there. We're going to look like grasshoppers to them. They're going to crush us. I'm afraid. I think we're not doing it. I'm not doing it. Forget it. And Joshua and Caleb, who I can imagine their heads exploding, say, are you guys mashugana crazy? God is with us. By the way, what are you thinking? And this horrible event is where we're called a congregation. And therefore, though the 10 spies make up us as our evilest self, an evil congregation, right? And we 10 are sort of reversing the course of that. Now, those 10 spies, just so you know what a low point in Jewish history this is, these are the Shmendriks that cause us to wander in the wilderness till the generations are dead who said no thank you to going into the land. 40 years. It's a long time. Anyway, that is where we get our proof text for Minyan. So, Baruch Hu is done in Minyan. Let's move on. All right. I wanted to share with you this little Talmudic quote because I think it's really quite extraordinary. Could someone please read it for me? What
Hello?
kind of people? Did someone say something? So someone, anybody, read what kind of people?
What kinds of people are called dead even when they're alive? Those who see the morning sunlight, those who see the sunset, those who eat and drink, and are not stirred to say a blessing. Cool.
Yeah, really lovely. Okay. We talked about our need to be more blessing filled, right? And that's a call that one can do anytime, any day. You don't need to be in Minyan or in, with a group. The Ma'ariv Aravim taps into what I was telling you about one of the major themes of Shabbat worship, that of creation. And it is such a beautiful blessing. I wanted to unpack it. So can we turn to the next slide, please?
Cantor, you're getting very soft.
I'm sorry. It against my stomach, which is where the microphone is. Sorry. Okay. Give me, someone read these three, please. Mariva Ravim.
Maria Varavim.
Oh.
Maria
Mariva.
Varavim.
So this is go ahead, Rube.
Yeah.
Mariva Ravim is the first
Varavim is the first blessing before the Shema. It is considered to be the parallel prayer to Yotzeror, which is recited in the same place during the morning service. Just as Yotzeror speaks of the coming of light, Mariva Varavim speaks of the coming of darkness. These are considered the first preparatory blessings for the recitation of Shema and affirm our appreciation for God's creation.
Beautiful. So this is one of the creation prayers. What do you know about nighttime in terms of an ancient people?
Didn't they fear nighttime?
Wouldn't you? Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Imagine seeing the sun go down, right? Now, if you're really ancient people, right? Sun goes down and you wonder to yourself, what?
Will we ever see
Whether it's
light
going to
again?
come up again or not.
Whether it's coming up again.
Yeah.
Has this just been a fluke? Or are we doing this again tomorrow? And I'm really hoping we are. So it gets dark. It gets scary. And by embracing it, by acknowledging it, there's maybe a piece of superstition in it. Let's look at the prayer. Next slide, please. Okay, I didn't know if anyone was interested in practicing the Hebrew, but I really want you to read the English because I think it's so beautiful. Would someone do me the honor of reading the English?
Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who speaks the evening into being.
Stop, Linda. When was evening spoken into being?
Well,
But, he said, let there be light, and then he said, let there be darkness,
And there was evening and morning.
the first day.
So God literally does speak it into being. It's right in our creation story, right? Keep going. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Skillfully opens the gates.
Stop. Skillfully opens the gates. What is that imagery all about, guys? When else do you hear about opening of gates?
On Yom Kippur.
On the
Open
high
the
holidays.
gates.
On the high holidays, to be sure. What happens when the gates are open?
Supposedly our prayers go up to God.
Well, there seems to be some sort of divine penetration, doesn't there?
Mhm.
Right? Some sort of, we're not, there's a accessibility, let's say.
Yeah.
All right, moving on, please. Keep going, Linda.
Thoughtfully alters the time and changes the season, and arranges the stars in their heavenly courses according to plan.
Isn't that gorgeous? I just love that. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
You are creator of day and night, rolling light away from darkness and darkness from light, transforming day into night and distinguishing one from the other. Adonai Sevaot is your name. Ever-living God, may you reign continually over us into eternity. Blessed are you, Adonai, who brings on evening.
Beautiful. And what feelings do you get about this? What sort of is why might it be important to talk about this piece right now?
To lessen people's fright, although that doesn't even really make sense to me because people by this time would know that day was going to follow night. So I'm not sure what I just said makes any sense.
Well, I think it makes a lot of sense because I think that it accesses that piece of us that gets grateful or notices a blessing, right? It illuminates something that we know and yet we ignore.
Want to be assured of it.
I'm sorry, say it again.
Want to be assured of it.
Want to be assured of it. I think that there's some whose theology this is a comfort to, that somehow God's in charge of this. God's got it, right? For others, for me, for example, that theology doesn't ring true. I see it as a beautiful metaphor. But I think that those, to be able to see the magnificence of it, the miracle of it, allows me to get grateful for it. And so that's what this prayer does to me, for me. It helps me to get grateful. Now, we've just come off our call to worship and we're heading towards the Shema. And so these moments of, sorry, I just had a kid walk in. Those moments of being awake are, I think, pretty important, right? As we head towards really the most important statement, declaration that we have as a Jewish people. Let's move on to the next slide. So are you looking at, I'm sorry, I just went to my notes for a second. Oops, I lost my Zoom. This is the Ahavat Olam. Could someone please read the Ahavat Olam in English, the endless?
Ahavat Olam is the second prayer that is recited during Mariv. It is the parallel blessing to Ahava Rabbah that is recited during morning service, and likewise is an expression to God for the gift of the Torah.
Beautiful. And Rosalind, continue with what the translation of it is. Endless is your love? Is it
Endless love for your people, Israel. You have taught us Torah and its mitzvot, laws and judgment. Therefore, O God, when we lie down and when we rise up, we shall speak of your commandments and rejoice in your Torah and mitzvot forever. Day and night we will reflect on them. They are our life and the length of our days. Your love shall never depart from our hearts. Blessed are you, eternal God, who loves your people, Israel.
Beautiful. What theme do you see in there of the three we've talked about?
Do you
So-
mean
So it's
the redemption? Are
yeah,
those the-
revelation, redemption, and creation.
Well, I would like to say all three.
It sort of marries things, doesn't it? Right? It certainly harkens back to creation. It certainly has revelation in terms of thank you for the Torah, right? And you know that this allows us to connect to something redemptive, I think, isn't it too? A funny story about this. So Ahavat Rabbah is recited in the morning. Ahavat Olam is recited in the evening, but that's a compromise. So Ahavat Rabbah is the Ashkenazi prayer, and the Ahavat Olam is a Sephardic prayer, okay? And the Sephardim recite Ahavat Olam at both morning and evening, but the debate over this recitation occurred in Babylonia. Talked a little bit about the Gaon, and so one of the rabbinic authorities around 9th century made the ruling that we're going to split the baby, right? We'll do the Ahava Rabbah in the morning and the Ahavat Olam at night, and that way everybody's happy, which I love those stories because, you know, Judaism is nothing if not a dance, right? Okay, all of this is preparing us for the watchword of our faith. Can we please change to the next slide? And we're looking at the Shema. This, guys, is Torah at its heart. It is from Deuteronomy 6. And when I say Torah, it's simply the first line here. The second line of the Shema is a later insertion we're going to talk about in a minute. Maybe cognizant. Oh my gosh, how did we go through that much time? We're amazing. Okay, so, and the Ve'ahavta, when we say the Shema, we're sort of talking about it on a whole. But this first line, can we change to the next slide? So, Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad is straight from Deuteronomy. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. Now, this is, as I said, considered the watchword of our faith. Why is it so important?
Because it proclaims monotheism.
It does proclaim monotheism. It does. And it does even more than that. Because if well, let's just stick with the monotheism point because this is pretty big, right? You could translate Adonai Echad as Adonai, God alone, right? What I love about this is that we clearly do embrace monotheism, but if you think that it was never tricky or there wasn't great wrestling with it, you'd be wrong. And next week I want to talk about, I'm using this as a teaser. Next week we're going to talk about the use of the word Elohim in our Torah. We're going to talk about our monotheistic practices and were they truly monotheistic, and why this particular statement is so pivotal and interesting. Our time is almost up. We have 2 minutes. Can you believe that? I had so much fun. What questions can I answer of what we covered today? And then Rabbi Morantz, I'm happy to give you the last word. No? Okay. You're sweet. Any questions about what we've covered thus far? All right. It is a joy to study with all of you. And if there's something you're not getting from this class, but you'd like to get, I know some of you talked to me about studying more how you say some of these prayers, that the Hebrew is intimidating to you. I'm happy to have a second class, sort of a side class, where we can just dive in to the Hebrew and the translation and how, we'll do it like line by line. We'll learn to say the Hebrew and then we'll translate the parts. But I wanted to give more of an overview in this class. Okay?
I would love to have copies of the slides from last weekend, this week, and anything following.
I would be happy to do that because I have Cassandra, who is the ace in the hole. Is that possible before I promise it?
That is totally possible. Yeah.
I would really love to have them in advance so that I can take notes on the slides rather than on paper.
Sure.
Yeah.
I don't see any problem. I literally am just staying a class ahead of us.
That's okay. I mean, I could have, if I had them 10 minutes before class, I could have printed them and written notes on them.
Yeah, we can do that.
Oh, for sure.
So I'm not trying to stress you out any more than you already are.
Not at all. Not at all. It will maybe make me get ahead of myself as opposed to other things. So it's a joy.
Cantor, I do have one thing to say.
Tell me, Rabbi.
Firstly, thank you to you and Kol Kavod
My pleasure.
for your wisdom and your warmth. Both go a long way. I want to thank everybody for participating today. Your presence here is so meaningful. Some of you I recognize. Some of you appear to be new friends. And so, Bruchim Habayim, it is a blessing to have all of you and to welcome you all. Cassandra, thank you for keeping things organized online. Presentation is, not only is it full of great content, it looks good too.
Thank you, Cassandra is right. Could we just go around the room really quick? Would everyone feel comfortable introducing themselves and letting us know how you found out about the class so we can keep publicizing in those arenas?
I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can see everybody.
And I'm going to stop the recording so no one feels embarrassed about
Anything.
anything.